Imagine your life right now. Think about the safety nets you rely on every single day.
Right, like cloud backups for your photos or insurance for your car.
Exactly. Even just the ability to hit undo when you make a typo in a document. Now, I want you to take that concept and scale it up to, well, absolute immortality.
Which is a massive leap.
It really is.
Yeah.
Imagine you live in a society where physical aging has just been totally eradicated. Scarcity is a relic of ancient history, and your actual consciousness, your mind, can be backed up and transmitted across the stars.
You're practically a god at that point.
Yeah, and you and your partner have been married for 10,309 years.
Just let that number sink in for a second. 10,000.
You've raised generations, you've mastered countless disciplines. So the question is, what would it actually take for you to willingly turn off every single one of those safety nets?
Yeah.
Because when survival is permanently guaranteed, you inevitably start looking for, the one door in the entire galaxy that has been locked shut for a million years.
Which is such a beautifully human impulse.
It is. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're exploring a factual account from Greg Egan's universe, and we are centering on two citizens of this galaxy-spanning amalgam civilization, Leila and Jasim.
It is a really remarkable narrative because it forces us to examine the psychological burden of a post-scarcity existence.
Right.
Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack how Leila and Jasim's deeply personal quest for a meaningful conclusion to their extraordinarily long lives led to literally the greatest galactic discovery in a million years.
It's just wild.
We are going to look at the mechanics of extreme curiosity, the absolute necessity of genuine risk, and how a post-human society grapples with the concept of a grand purpose when every conceivable material need has been met for millennia.
Whether you're, prepping for a meeting right now or just trying to cure your own boredom on a commute, there is a profound lesson here about how we find meaning when we feel like we've seen it all. So the environment they're operating in is super critical to understanding their motivations. The amalgam is this explosion of diversity. It's a civilization that spans the entire disk of the Milky Way.
It operates as this sort of open source utopia. You've got trillions of citizens representing countless species.
Yeah.
And they are just sharing data constantly.
Yeah, you can upload your mind, travel as data at the speed of light, and then just download into a freshly minted physical body light years away.
Which sounds perfect.
It sounds perfect, but Leila and Jasim don't want to live forever. They have mutually agreed that they want their existence to end, but they're completely paralyzed by the timing.
I mean, how do you pick a day to die when tomorrow offers another completely perfect century? It's practically impossible.
Exactly. They need a grand finale, something that makes the end feel earned.
Which brings them to the Aloof.
Right, the Aloof. So while the amalgam controls the galactic disk, the central bulge, that incredibly dense cluster of stars right at the core of the Milky Way, is completely sealed off.
It is occupied by a civilization known only as the Aloof. And for a million years, they have maintained this policy of absolute, unbreakable isolation.
Any probe, any ship, any piece of technology sent into their territory is caught by some unknown means and just gently but firmly bounced right back out into the disk.
Yeah, there's no message attached, no declaration of war, just a million years of a closed door.
The sociological contrast there is just staggering to me. You have the amalgam, which is essentially a noisy, galaxy-wide chat room, right? And it's surrounding this completely silent, impenetrable fortress.
And what's fascinating here is that Leila and Jasim aren't trying to breach the central bulge with some massive armada.
No, not at all.
They're driven by this optimistic, maybe even slightly naive idea that a million years of silence might just be a tragic failure to communicate. They don't want to conquer. They want to understand the Aloof.
And that desire to understand prompts them to journey to Nazdik. It's a world perched on the very edge of the amalgam's territory, right on the border of the central bulge.
Because travel in the amalgam relies on transmitting consciousness as data, they have to undergo a 20,000-year journey at light speed just to get there.
Just a casual 20,000-year commute.
Right. They arrive at Nazdik, wake up in their new physical bodies, and begin the research. And I have to say, their choice of neighbors on Nazdik adds such a fascinating philosophical layer to this whole mission.
Oh, the snakes. I love this detail. They consult the locals, right? This species whose ancestral form resembles these large, furred, carbon-based snakes.
Yeah, and they live in these massive squat cylinders. They look like big water tanks packed with pungent moss.
And they communicate through this low-frequency thumping. Leila actually mentally tags three of them as Tim, John, and Sarah, just to keep track of who is who.
Which is very human of her. But beyond their physical form, the snakes are essentially monks. They came to Nazdik specifically for isolation.
Yeah, they've been cloistered in these tanks for 15,000 years, doing basically nothing but pondering the fundamental nature of reality and the uses of existence.
And when you have beings who have spent 15 millennia analyzing the concept of purpose, their insight is going to be piercing.
Brutally so.
When Leila explains their quest, that they want to find a meaningful end by studying the Aloof, Sarah, one of the snakes, points out a completely devastating flaw in their logic.
She basically tells them they're just replacing one impossible judgment with another one.
Exactly. They fled their home world because they couldn't decide when to end their lives. Now, they have to decide when to admit defeat against a million-year-old mystery.
The snakes have watched civilizations break their intellectual backs against the silence of the Aloof for millennia.
It's a sobering warning. Adopting an impossible goal doesn't actually cure your existential dread. It merely redirects it.
So you have to wonder, is it curiosity driving them at this point, or is it just a stubborn refusal to accept that some doors are just closed?
Well, they spend 17 years on Nazdik doing nothing but staring at mountains of data.
17 years of static. Just looking at the stars in the central bulge, filtering through cosmic noise, hoping to see something that billions of brilliant minds over a million years somehow missed.
The sheer psychological endurance required for that is difficult to fathom.
It really is. But then, and here's where it gets really interesting, the anomaly appears. Leila notices a tiny, almost imperceptible blip in the data stream.
Right. She observes nuclei of a specific isotope of fluorine decaying from an excited state inside a deep space gas cloud.
And finding a fluorine gas cloud is rare enough on its own.
But finding one being struck by an invisible source of energy is a monumental statistical anomaly. There is no obvious source of radiation nearby that could have caused the excitation.
None. And it isn't a singular event either. It happens multiple times, and the flashes line up perfectly in space and time.
Which leads Leila to a brilliant deduction. This isn't random cosmic noise at all.
It's a tightly focused gamma ray beam. She realizes they are literally looking at a communication network.
The Aloofs are talking to each other across the central bulge, using tightly focused beams of radiation.
And occasionally, a tiny, tiny fraction of that radiation spills out past its intended receiver and just happens to strike the gas clouds in the galactic disk.
Leila and Jasim have essentially found the exhaust fumes of a hidden, galaxy-spanning internet.
It's such a cool concept, but intercepting that beam presents an engineering nightmare of just staggering proportions.
Oh, absolutely. They can't simply observe the scatter flashes in the gas cloud if they want to actually read the data.
Right. They need to put a highly advanced observatory in deep space, directly in the path of the beam, moving at the precise speed necessary to catch the spillage before the Aloof's transmitting nodes drift and the beam shifts its trajectory.
And there are no planets there. There are no raw materials. They have to construct an observatory in the absolute void of space.
So Jasim comes up with this insane solution called collision breaking. He uses 3 separate components launched from completely different amalgam outposts, light years apart.
This is where the physics gets mind-bending.
Oh yeah. They fire relativistic packages into empty space. Package 1 is a sphere. Package 2 is a torus, like a donut shape.
And the sphere has to thread the gap in the middle of the torus, bouncing back and forth through it 17 times.
Right, and this magnetic friction bleeds off their kinetic energy, converting it into stored electricity. Then, both of those modules, now locked together, have to slot perfectly into a third module, a cylinder, arriving from an entirely different vector.
We were talking about coordinating 3 objects traveling at a fraction of a percent below the speed of light, launched decades apart, to intersect at a microscopic point in deep space.
Imagine trying to coordinate 3 strangers on different continents to hit a bullseye with laser pointers at the exact same millisecond, but on a galactic scale, and taking 36 years to execute.
The mathematical precision is almost impossible to fully conceptualize, but the amalgam provides the vast resources required, the modules launch, and they combine flawlessly to form the Trident Observatory.
But the creation of Trident is overshadowed by a deeply emotional, consequential choice Jasim makes before they upload their consciousness to the station.
This is a turning point.
It is. He insists on deleting every backup of themselves left behind on Nazdik. No safety net.
And from a modern, survival-oriented perspective, that seems incredibly reckless. In a society that has definitively conquered death, manufacturing artificial risk borders on pathological.
Exactly. They have the technology to explore this mystery perfectly safely. Why intentionally introduce the possibility of permanent annihilation?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, consider the psychology of an immortal. In a universe where you can beam your data anywhere, where physical death is just a temporary inconvenience remedied by restoring a backup from an archive, your actions inherently lose their weight.
Consequences become an illusion.
Precisely. Jasim realizes they are on the verge of the greatest discovery in galactic history. If they do this with a safety net, it is just another experiment. He wants to risk his actual finite existence in this pursuit so the endeavor possesses genuine meaning. He is forcing reality to have stakes again.
It is a profound rejection of that post-scarcity comfort zone. So they transmit themselves to Trident, risking final death, and the gamble actually pays off. Trident successfully intercepts a pulse of gamma rays from the Aloof's network.
The beam is completely packed with data.
Now, the actual payload, the content of the messages, is heavily encrypted, but they do manage to crack the routing information. They can read the unencrypted addresses showing where the data originates and its final destination.
And the fallout from this interception is immediate. It totally transforms the amalgam. Sharing their findings triggers a galactic renaissance.
I love this scene. There's a massive celebration, basically a decades-long carnival known as a listening party, that erupts on a planet called Tassif. 1 billion pilgrims from across the galaxy gather just to watch the real-time mapping of the Aloof's hidden highways across the sky.
The technological leap driven by this discovery is fascinating too. To map the network, the amalgam begins mass-producing strong bullets, which are essentially femto machines.
Right, they are building microscopic observatories out of subatomic particles.
The physics behind the strong bullets is a brilliant application of relativity. These femto machines are clusters of protons and neutrons that are inherently unstable. Under normal conditions, they decay in trillionths of a second.
How do they use them?
Well, the amalgam fires billions of them at ultra-relativistic speeds. The extreme velocity induces severe time dilation. So from the perspective of the outside universe, these particles survive long enough to merge, form tiny observatories, collect data on the Aloof's network, and transmit it back before they decay.
They are literally mapping the entire infrastructure of the central bulge using subatomic dust riding the edge of the speed of light. It's an unprecedented triumph of engineering and astrophysics.
They get a complete map.
But despite the billions of pilgrims celebrating on Tassif, the reality of their situation is a crushing anticlimax.
Yeah, it really is. They've essentially built the greatest wiretap in the history of the universe, but they still don't speak the language.
They're looking at a glowing fiber optic cable without a modem. They know the roads exist, but they have no idea who is driving on them or what they are communicating. The encryption on the actual messages remains completely unbreakable.
And that specific frustration pushes Leila to the absolute extreme.
Okay, let's unpack this, because waiting another 1,000,000 years for an encryption breakthrough completely defeats the purpose of their mortal timeline.
She wants an end. She does. So she realizes that because they possess the routing protocol, they are no longer restricted to just listening. She proposes formatting her own consciousness, her entire data structure, as unencrypted classical data and mailing herself directly into the Aloof's network.
Which is just terrifying. She wants to address herself to a receiving node on the opposite side of the central bulge, a destination called Massa. She intends to force an interaction.
She is proposing handing her very soul over to an utterly alien intelligence that has actively rejected all contact since the dawn of their recorded history.
And Jasim's reaction is just absolute horror. He argues that the Aloof could trap her consciousness in an endless loop. They could alter her fundamental personality or subject her to agonizing psychological experiments. There are zero diplomatic protections.
It is the ultimate vulnerability. Yet Leila is completely resolute. She cannot turn back after coming this far.
And Jasim, despite his rational terror and his arguments against the plan, refuses to let her face it alone. His loyalty overrides his fear. He basically tells her, whatever they do to you, let them do it to us both.
So they interweave their data into a single complex packet so they cannot be easily separated, and they step into a transmitter on Tassif, firing themselves directly into the void of the central bulge.
The transition for Leila is instantaneous, but when she wakes up, she is completely alone.
She isn't in a physical body or even a familiar, simulated environment. She finds herself in a pristine virtual space, floating in a vast, silent star map.
She is entirely severed from the massive, comforting data feeds of the amalgam. She has no somatic knowledge, no sensation of a virtual body, just pure awareness.
She broadcasts a message into the void, asking if anyone is listening, but the Aloof offer no greeting. No avatar appears to explain the rules, just an overwhelming, chilling silence.
She calls out for Jasim, but gets no answer.
The mechanics of the Aloof's interface are a masterclass in alien intelligence. They don't subject her to interrogations or puzzles, they simply read her raw intent.
When Leila experiences a wave of nostalgia and focuses her attention back toward the disk of the galaxy, toward the safety of the amalgam, a cylinder of violet light materializes in the virtual space, offering a clear trajectory back home.
But when she clears her mind and focuses her intent deeper into the bulge, toward the unknown galactic core, the tunnel of light shifts, offering to take her forward.
The psychological weight of that interaction is immense. She has to choose her fate based entirely on an unwritten architecture with zero guarantees.
And the most agonizing part is that she has to make this choice without knowing what Jasim experienced or what he chose.
Because the Aloof processed their interwoven data packet and separated them anyway. If she chooses to push forward and he chose to retreat to safety, she loses him forever.
If she retreats and he pushed forward, the result is the same. She is forced to rely entirely on the depth of a 10,000-year bond, trusting that he understands her need to see this through to the end.
So she focuses her intent on the core, and she chooses to go deeper.
And the reward for that leap of faith is the most majestic climax imaginable. The Aloof grant Leila a grand tour of the forbidden galactic core.
She is awakened at every major node across the network. She is given a front-row seat to astrophysical phenomena no citizen of the amalgam has ever witnessed up close.
She observes cannibalistic novas tearing stellar material from their companions. She sees dazzling, chaotic clusters of newborn stars igniting in the deep dust lanes.
She watches twin white dwarfs locked in a death spiral on the verge of collision. And ultimately, she is brought to the supermassive black hole at the very center of the galaxy.
Watching its vast accretion disk glow with intense X-rays as it slowly, inexorably consumes the surrounding stars. It is an awe-inspiring, terrifying journey through the heart of creation and destruction.
She witnesses the majesty of the universe operating in perfect, isolated silence, and eventually she emerges safely from the network on the other side of the bulge at Massa.
And she is successfully reunited with Jasim. They both survive the transit.
But here is the ultimate twist of this entire million-year mystery. It's the asymmetry of their experience. While Leila was granted this godlike, multi-stop tour of the galactic core,
Jasim experienced absolutely nothing.
Nothing. For him, he stepped into the transmitter on Tassif, and in the next perceived fraction of a second, he materialized on Massa.
No stars, no black holes, no virtual waiting room, no choices, just a jump cut.
And the records show that a later traveler, a heptapod who followed their exact route, also experienced nothing but a blink.
This raises an important question, maybe the most profound question of the entire narrative. Why the discrepancy? Why did the Aloof construct a bespoke, breathtaking tour for Leila, but process Jasim as mere background data?
Was it because she was the instigator? The one whose curiosity drove the project from that first night in the garden?
Or was it because the Aloof's systems could read the purity of her desire to understand, while sensing that Jasim was primarily there out of a sense of duty and loyalty to his partner?
Or is the answer completely arbitrary? The enduring brilliance of the Aloof is that they remain fundamentally alien. They offer no debriefing. They don't owe the universe or Leila or Jasim an explanation.
They open the road, but they keep their secrets.
The resolution of their incredible journey is surprisingly quiet, contrasting the sheer scale of what they accomplished. They leave the chaotic, endless celebrations happening at the receiving station on Massa and walk up into the quiet foothills of an alien world called Astrahat.
They sit under a dense forest canopy, looking up at the unfamiliar stars of the central bulge.
And in that quiet moment, Leila finally realizes she has done enough. They pushed the absolute boundaries of the known universe. They unraveled a million-year-old mystery through sheer endurance and lethal risk.
They survived the judgment of an unfathomable intelligence.
They don't need to live another 10,000 years to see what the amalgam does with the network. They decide to stop, drink the last drops of water from their canteen, and finally embrace the end they had been seeking since the very beginning.
It is a profoundly earned conclusion. They didn't just find a random time to die. They achieved a state of completion. And I think the application here extends far beyond the realm of immortal beings in a post-scarcity galaxy.
How so?
Well, when you find yourself paralyzed by the infinite options of modern life, or when you feel entirely uninspired by the information you have access to, you have to actively seek out the anomalies.
Look for the fluorine gas clouds.
Exactly. Look for the metaphorical fluorine gas clouds in your own field of work or study. Seek out the data points that refuse to align with the accepted models. Furthermore, Jasim's decision to delete his backups serves as a vital reminder that an obsession with safety often hollows out the value of our achievements.
Taking a genuine, irrevocable risk is frequently the only mechanism we have to infuse our actions with true meaning.
The safety net guarantees survival, but it rarely guarantees satisfaction.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering thought to dissect. Consider the silent judgment of the Aloof. They offered no words, no philosophy, and no explanations. Yet they granted Leila a breathtaking, personalized tour of the galactic core while giving Jasim the equivalent of a loading screen.
It really makes you wonder about the metrics of higher intelligence.
Exactly. What if the highest form of intelligence doesn't actually value the actions we take or the words we speak, but simply the raw purity of the intent that drives us? If an unimaginably advanced silent observer could peer into your mind right now and read the unfiltered, fundamental desires driving your daily routine, what kind of tour would they decide you deserve? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep looking for the anomalies and keep exploring the unknowns in your own universe.